folks, and welcome to an extra special edition of The Musician's Musician. This week, I got to sit down with somebody I've wanted to have a chat with for a long time, and that person is Nick Costa. Now, I know what you're thinking. Is he talking about himself? Is this some kind of like self-reflecting, weird Lynchian kind of episode? It's not. There is another Nick Costa. I feel like if you're a songwriter or a musician that goes by your own name, you likely have some other person with your exact name that you often, see around on the internet, or you get confused for. You get their emails and you have to kind of like forward them to the right one. And there are many Nick Costas in the game. However, it seems like the one who I encountered the most was the Philadelphia-based Nick Costa, who is a phenomenal drummer. If you find him on Instagram or a TikTok, you'll see that he has posted 740 videos of him doing a Guess the Song series where he plays the drum parts of popular songs without the backing tracks, and he nails them every time, by the way. It's just really incredible what he has accomplished, and we do talk about all the things that he has coming up, which is super exciting. Now, did I ask him to be on the show because we share a name and I thought it would be funny? Of course, that's a contributing factor. Yeah, but over the years, I've actually been following Nick, and I'm really amazed by his skill and his knowledge, and it seemed like a perfect opportunity for us to finally connect and chat. When he picked Mammoth for his artist, it made a lot of sense because it's one guy who is both an incredible drummer and an incredible guitar player and songwriter, so it just seemed like the perfect place for us to meet and kind of talk about music from both of our perspectives as Nick Costas. So Nick is an awesome guy. I was so thrilled to get to chat with him. It was kind of funny when I was talking, he would mute his mic, and I would get so confused because I would see the mute symbol next to the name Nick Costa, and I would think like, oh no, I muted myself. What's going on? So you might hear me frantically try and figure that out every now and then. God, what a silly thing. So anyway, with all of that, let's get into it. There we are. All right. I am here with Nick Costa. Nick, thank you for being a musician's musician.
Yeah, and thank you, Nick Costa, for inviting me. This is such a cool thing.
Yes. It's really a trip. Before we get into anything, I want to apologize for all of the usernames that I got before you. All of the email addresses, yeah.
Man, because I think you and I have both been fighting over various Nick Costa musics in some way, shape, or form. I did get Nick Costa music at Gmail, and I apologize. I am sorry about that. That's all good, man, because I got nickcostamusic.com. So I was able to make my own email on my website, so that was pretty dope.
That's true. That is true. We all win at some capacity.
In some way, shape, or form,
Well, we are going to talk about somebody who I had never really done the dive on, and it's not too deep of a dive. But we're going to talk about Mammoth Wolfgang Van Halen. But before we do that, you are like an you're a very busy drummer, and like very prolific with videos online and everything like that. Is there anything that you are working on currently that you're like really excited about?
Yeah. So, if we had to split up my career, I would say 80% of it is actually teaching. 20% is performing, social media, video, all of that kind of stuff. It's always been something I've been into. I was making videos, back when drum covers were all the rage in YouTube, like 2010, give or take. And then with copyright, everything else, it kind of all went to the wayside. COVID came around. I had to do something for my students. So I just started making like lesson videos for them so they could continue on with their lessons. And then that just steamrolled into what it is today. So for now, I just signed a deal with Gator. So I am now officially an artist with Gator for specifically their drum cases, because they just came out with some amazing, both hard and soft cases that are unbelievable. I saw them at PASIC a couple of years ago. So that was a really cool collaboration thing.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And, with everything that Gator has to offer with cables and mic stands and everything else, it helps out with all of the video content too. That's really dope. I have a graduate level drum set course that is going to be at Westchester University at the end of July. Awesome. I've been co-teaching that with my mentor, Mark DiCiani, fellow jazz drummer. Let's see, he was Ben Vereen's touring drummer for decades. He's played with, Frank Sinatra and Mel Torme and Sammy Davis and all those cats. So he started this drum set course probably a few decades ago. And then, the last 10 years, I jumped on as his assistant, and we've been co-teaching it where we have 2 levels running simultaneously. So
that's incredible.
It's pretty dope. So it's a week-long course where music educators come hang out with us and learn how to play drum set. The one thing we've noticed as educators, and with my background being in drum set along with Mark's, is that nobody really talks about drum set in the traditional music classroom. Everything is all classical or marching based, and kids like myself, we're outliers, right? So we want to change that. We want to show that the drum set is a pivotal instrument. It's something that educators should know about. And it makes no sense that people spend all this time and effort taking pedagogy classes and doing all that fun stuff. Sure. Only to not talk about drum set, either because whoever's doing the percussion methods isn't a drum set player, they're a classical or marching guy, or if they do, it's very short because it's a 14-week class and they don't have enough time to cover everything, right? So This is something that Mark and I are trying to change. And we have a lot of companies that are on our side. We're, he's a Yamaha guy. I'm a Ludwig guy. But all of our other companies, Zildjian, Remo, Vic Firth, they're all in 100%. They're all in on this, and they want to try and help us. And Westchester's interested in doing some stuff with it too and expanding upon it. So, we're working on trying to get all that done. And then early August, I fly out to Winnipeg in Canada to do the Canadian Percussion Network's, what they call the Space Between. This is, I think, the 4th one that they're doing, where they try and figure out that connection between drumming and, the mind-body holistic approach, the healthy side of things.
Oh, amazing.
I was selected to perform. So I'm going to just play a tune, and then I'm going to talk about 5 macrocosms to improve your playing. So, it's all the stuff that every musician has to do. So, breathing, correct posture, relaxation, compassion towards oneself, and, confidence on the instrument. So I get to do that, which is dope. And, I've been accepted, and, I think I can share this. I'm going to be presenting at PASIC this year in Indianapolis alongside Mark DiCiani. So
kidding.
That's going to be happening. Yeah, it's going to be happening in November. So
congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Plus, being a dad of 2 kids, one is 4 and the other is 2.
Oh yeah. So you're busy. You're a busy guy.
Yeah, man.
Well, I'm a little curious. I want to kind of talk about this, because I can technically play drums, but I'm in no way, shape, or form a drummer. So as somebody who is mainly a drummer, teaches drums, is there a style of drums that you like to play the most? And is there a style of drums that you like to teach the most?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say pop, the big umbrella of pop is kind of my favorite thing to do.
Sure.
And as far as gigging is concerned, it's actually musical theater.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I've heard
that from a lot of people, actually. There's a lot of musicians that love musical theater.
It's awesome. And, and the majority of my work that I do as a gigging musician is in theater work. So, the best part about it is that, you could be playing one show, but there's all these different styles that you have to play within the show. And then every show is going to be different because the actors could be inflicting something a little bit differently one night over the other night, or, the audience is just a little bit more lively one night over the other. So although you're doing the same thing, it ends up feeling a little bit different, and it's changing up so frequently that it doesn't feel like you're on autopilot as you're playing through the show.
Sure.
And you got to do everything, you have to do like the typical boom chick musical theater stuff from back in the day. There's a ton of these like rock operas coming out now. So,
a lot of them, yeah.
A ton of them. So you're doing more fun stuff, mixed in with a little bit of jazz and ballads. And, there's always the sappy love song in there somewhere. Of
course, yeah, for sure.
Where you got to do like the yacht rock fills and that kind of stuff,
Yeah, for sure.
So I would say that's my favorite. Now, in regards to teaching, believe it or not, I think it's all kind of connected when you think about it. So the main thing that I always look at is I always try to see where the drummer or the musician is first and say, okay, let's get you started with just getting everything connected, because everyone, I think, they see the drum set, they see it's big, it's loud, right? So there's a sensory overload when it comes to the instrument. Yeah. So it's a matter of what can I do as the educator to allow kind of the nerves to be a little calmer, be a little more at ease. And it's okay, we have to connect what's going on up here to your hands and your feet. And it's not as bad as you think it is, because you can multitask. Sure. So we start out with just like the basic eighth note, meat and potato, rock grooves, find some songs that use those grooves as like the core fundamental groove, and trying to get people to play along to it. And then once they get into that and feel comfortable enough, then start diving into some other things like maybe 16th note subdivisions, especially that throws some people off, especially with the bass drum foot, the right hand and the right foot's all connected. And then when they feel comfortable enough, then we start diving into more triplet bass stuff. So this could be shuffles. It could be, and so many different types of shuffles, jazz shuffles, all of the different shuffles from the South, or even like halftime Purdy, Bonham shuffle.
I was going to say stuff. The Purdy shuffle. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that's always a really good way to bridge from standard eighth note grooves and all that kind of stuff into jazz, because a lot of folks, especially when they get to a certain point, might turn around and go, oh, I want to learn jazz. But when you ask them why, it's just like, well, it seems like that's what I have to do. And that's what all the good players do. And, myself, I attended the University of the Arts. It was a jazz study program. And it was fantastic because you learn a ton of stuff and you can carry it over.
Sure.
It's just, it can be overwhelming because there is so much freedom when it comes to playing jazz. Right.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people try and give you a path of like, hey, you want to learn jazz? Okay, here's the basic jazz groove, but it's all backwards, right? Because like that jazz groove, I don't know if you'll hear this, but like that pattern that you hear on a jazz ride cymbal, if you put on a jazz record, like the drummer is not playing that. They're playing quarter notes most of the time,
Yep.
So if you try to tell that to a beginner, they're going to be like, huh? Like I want to learn this, but you're not telling me exactly what to do,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So doing all that other stuff helps kind of get them a little more comfortable to get to that point.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it also just kind of builds a little bit of like a foundation for like not really being restricted to a genre, like if you're learning these basic things, you have the fundamentals to like, maybe I want to play on these pop songs or something like that. Or maybe I want to play on these, punk songs or something like that. So
yeah. And it's funny you say that. So like one of my schools is very drum set heavy. It's it's a 9 to 12 high school, public ed. And the drum lesson groups are split up in like their experiences on the drums. So the more advanced students, it's usually a smaller group, maybe 3-4 students tops. And last year there was one student in particular who I would put a song on and they wouldn't be able to play it. And rather than saying, you know what, I just don't know how to do this, can you show me? They would make excuses and say like, well, it's because it's a style of music I don't play. I don't like that. I'm this type of drummer. I'm not that type of drummer. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, here's our midterm. I'm going to have you all pick 4 songs. And out of those 4 songs, we're going to make a giant list. And then I'm going to pick 4 songs that are going to be rock white boy music. And you are all going to have to play to this stuff. And I'm going to put it all in Moises, pull the drums out of it. And then you're going to have to figure out what these parts are and play along to it and see if you can hang. Because saying you're X drummer, Y drummer, and you can't do something else, that's not a valid excuse. Because when you get out into the real world, you're going to have to be able to hang and do that stuff. And you can't make that excuse, you know?
For sure.
So that kind of helps with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. Giving people the tools to be able to do that is so cool. So
yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, on that note, let's start talking about another musician who has a great variety of skills. Mammoth, Wolfgang Van Halen, obviously Eddie Van Halen's kid.
Yeah.
I usually ask this question, and I'm curious to see how this goes because there's not a huge catalog here, and it hasn't been going for a time. But do you remember the first time that you heard Mammoth?
Yeah. So our local rock station here in Philly, it's 93.3 MMR. They started playing it a lot, and they started playing the song that he released once his dad passed, which ended up being the last song on the first record. Right.
Sure.
And, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then, I myself am not a fan of streaming services like Spotify and Apple Music, just because, they're not paying anybody.
Yeah.
But then of course I use YouTube, or I try and buy the music when it comes out. But,
sure.
When he released that, I went on his YouTube page and saw that he also had a couple other tunes, and they were polar opposites of one another. So that was the first time I heard Mammoth. However, I knew of Wolf because of what he was doing in Van Halen.
Right.
I saw that last iteration, whatever, I think the album was called A Different Kind of Truth. It's the one that's got the train on the cover.
Yep.
So I saw that tour, and, obviously Wolf was the bass player at that point too. But, once I started diving into Mammoth and being like, oh, it's Eddie Van Halen's kid and everything else. And then it's like, wait a minute, he's playing everything.
Yeah.
And then you start hearing like the drum stuff he's doing, everything, singing, playing the guitar, playing all of the instruments. And you're like, man, like this dude is just not missing on anything now.
It's like kind of infuriating how not just like, oh, he's good at everything. It's like, he is better than most people at everything. Like he's an incredible singer, an unreal guitar player, like probably just as good, if not better than his dad was. Like, an incredible drummer, which I'm curious to know your thoughts on. Because I'm not much of a drummer. I just hear like showy drums every now and then and go like, I can't do that.
Sure. Yeah.
And like, he played bass in Van Halen, which like isn't really a cakewalk either, generally. So, like,
Michael Anthony's parts, man. Like, wild.
Yeah. So like, when you suggested listening to this, I was really curious to go into it because I didn't fully know what to expect. I just knew that he was good.
Yeah.
But there's like a fine line you can walk when you are that talented at what you do. And it's like, you can just be kind of showy and like, for the sake of being showy, Right. Whereas this record, which is Mammoth II, that we're kind of more focusing on, but we can bounce around. Like the songwriting is incredible, and all of his playing is catering to the songs. It's not like, here's a complex guitar part just because I can,
Yeah. And, it's funny you say that because like, The worst thing I think that I noticed with Mammoth was that as soon as he came out, it was like, man, the I don't want to call them Van Halen fans, man, because I don't think a true fan would have done what some of these cats were doing. But man, they were shooting him down left and right, like, oh, this kid's only getting credit because he's Eddie Van Halen's kid, and if he wasn't Eddie Van Halen's kid, no one would be paying attention to him. And it's like, man, like, are you? It sounds almost like you don't have your ears on right now, and you're just being a little bit bitter, and like telling Wolf on social media, like, man, like what his dad would do or say. And it's like, man, like I'm pretty sure Wolf would know because it's his dad, you know?
For sure. Yeah. And like the audacity you have to say that and like think that you know better than his kid.
Yeah.
Like, and also like invoke somebody's like dead loved one. Like, how dare you, first off?
Right. And on top of that, like, as you know, like, because you're doing stuff on social media and online too, right? Like, it is the Wild West, man. And like, nobody.
It is.
It's something that takes a while for you to get a following, but like some people will find you and think that like you're whatever following that you've created, you did overnight. So they're going to be like, any musician, they end up gatekeeping, right? Where they're like, man, who have you played with? You haven't played with anybody, but like, why are people listening and following you and like all this stuff? So you have somebody like Wolf, where like his dad was one of the greatest guitar players of all time.
Yeah.
And like, man, how dare you pick up a guitar and play the guitar because your dad played guitar, and it's like, come on, dude, like just let him do his thing. And, I think you and I can both agree, and anybody who listens and watches this episode, it's like, there are some folks out there who had parents who were famous musicians and they end up not doing their own thing. They do like hey, I was their kid, or I am their kid, and I'm just going to kind of tour around and give you an experience so you can reminisce on like what my parent did, kind of a thing. And Wolf didn't do that. He's not like, hey, I'm going to go do a Van Halen tribute. Here I go, everybody. It's like, no, he's doing his own thing, and he's got heavy hitters supporting him on the road, So
my God, yeah. I mean, they would have to be if they're filling his shoes. He's not a slouch in anything he does.
No.
So, like, how somebody can listen to, I mean, this record in particular, and think that like he is subpar or like, plus they're like not similar. Like Van Halen and Mammoth are drastically different bands.
Right. Exactly. And like, it's so cool too, because I have some other friends who are Van Halen fans. And when the first record came out, one friend in particular, he was like, hey, it's really cool because when I listen to this first record, I love it because you start to hear, he almost is giving like these guitar nods to his dad, like certain odd, it could be like a pick slide or a bend or things like that. And, or a certain rhythm that he plays at the end of a song that reminisces another song from Van Halen, almost like a, hey, like, thanks dad kind of a thing.
Totally.
And he's like, that's really dope. But I also think he was kind of cognizant that since he is Eddie's kid, that, he couldn't come out ripping like Eddie would do. But then, of course, he does the Taylor Hawkins tribute and does Hot for Teacher and rips the solo like his dad would rip. And
well, there was, like, speaking of that, in the song on this album, Take a Bow, there's a solo, and he actually uses his dad's Frankenstrat through the Marshall that they did Van Halen 1 on. And like the same cab and everything. So he just goes through his dad's old, like, classic rig. And like, there's an interview where he's talking about it and just being like, yeah, I listened back to it. I'm like, wow, on those bends, that just sounds like my dad. Like, that's so weird.
It's so cool. You know?
So there really is those little Easter eggs, like, just, embedded into his DNA, so it's like, it's
and
wild.
It's awesome, and like, let's talk about, the reason why I picked this record over the first record was because, I think both records are fantastic. I felt the first record, however, you know, if you listen to it from top to bottom, you can get through it. I feel like there really isn't any skips, but there are some like polarizing differences between the tunes a little bit, even though like the core is there, where I felt like this record was a bit more streamlined, you know, as far as from beginning to end. And like, I think both records hit you right in the face, but when I finally got the notification from Apple that the pre-order was ready for download, I put on that first track and I was like, wait a minute, well, hold on. Like, this is how he's starting it with the drums and the, like that whole rhythm, the digga 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 digga, and with the drums and everything. You're like, dude, he's just like, he's coming for it right from the beginning, you know?
Yeah, it is right out of the gate. Just
and
like...
it's dope. It was a great intro tune. You know, during that chorus, he's holding out that really long belt note and you're like, okay, like, here we go. And then it jumps into like a pastime. And that was one of the songs that you got to download with the pre-order.
Oh, sure.
And of course, like hearing the rhythm that he's playing in the intro, like the doom, da doom, 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 doom, da da. It's like, what? Like, you know, he's no slouch, man. Like, and mind you, his uncle is one of the greatest drummers of all time. And like, if you listen to any interview with Wolf, he says like that was one of the first instruments he picked up was the drums. So, and he shows it, he flexes totally. And he has every right to, because he's ripping and he's doing stuff where you're like, what?
Yeah.
It's wild, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I had known that he played every instrument before I went into it. And so like, I was expecting it to be good, but like, I like you said, like it starts off and it's just like, oh, he's like, oh, he's good. And I was just like, oh, that get lost, man. Like, how do you get to be that good? And, like everything on this album. And like, and again, like not just like technically proficient and like good, right? Because there's albums where I'm like, yes, they're playing well, but like it doesn't really connect. But like as a songwriter, like I'm listening to that and just being like, I mean, this holds up with like any of the great albums from this genre of like kind of more hard rock, I guess, would be like with the pop sensibility. I don't know what genre that would really be, but
like I haven't been able to put my finger on it either, right? Because like I guess if you start getting too deep into the hard rock, it becomes like that whole butt rock movement.
Yeah, you toe a line. You toe a line.
It's not that, you know?
No. I mean, like, I feel like, so there was moments where I was like, this reminds me of like when the Foo Fighters are good, you know?
Yeah, not beating the horse.
Yeah, and exactly. Yeah. And Foo Fighters they toe the line so hard on butt rock that they lean into butt rock often. But like when they go on the other side of it, it's like, this is very good. And that's what this album really reminded me of.
Totally. Yeah. And you know, I wanted to pick him, right? Because like when you were saying like, hey, pick an artist we can talk about, album and all that, it's like, man, you know, I think one of the hardest questions I ever get asked is who's your favorite drummer? Because it's like it depends on like the era, like where I was growing up. I was all about early 2000s pop punk Warped Tour, you know.
Same.
And then once I got to college, I got really into progressive metal, right? So I went from Travis Barker being the dude that made me want to play drums to Mike Portnoy.
Sure, yeah. And
you know, since I'm at a jazz school, they're like, "Hey, metalhead, like you have to play jazz." So then all of a sudden you're learning about Tony Williams and Elvin Jones and the differences between those two players, and both great in different regards, you know? And then once I got older, it became like you know what, it's okay to like different styles of music. It's okay to like musical theater, or, you know, now that I'm older, I guess because I'm a dad, I'm in the yacht rock or, you know, 70s soft rock. You know, but it's all good, you know?
Steely Dan comes for everybody at some point.
Exactly. Or like Toto, like Jeff Porcaro, one of the greatest to ever play, you know,
absolutely.
Like, or like you can go way back when you have like Hal Blaine with the Wrecking Crew and, you know, like all of those cats out of LA just playing on every major hit, you know?
Yeah.
where, growing up, I was like, nah, I don't want to listen to that. So the other question was like, okay, like what drummer do I want to focus on? And then, I was like, wait a minute, we should focus on Wolf because he's more than just a drummer. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He's a musician. He's a songwriter. And like, also the other thing too, is Garrett Whitlock is a beast in himself, because he's got to play all of this stuff. He can easily handle it, but like the dude also needs to get equal credit too, because it's not, even though it is Wolf's album and he's playing on everything, like if it wasn't for Garrett behind the kit, they wouldn't sound the way they do live. Right. Sure. So it's kind of like a twofold thing. And it's really cool to see a musician like Wolf where the ego is checked, It's not going to be, and don't get me wrong, I love the Foo Fighters and Dave Grohl, another animal behind the drums, but with the recent news coming out with everything with Josh Freese and everything else. And, they even said that like before Taylor's passing, there was conversations about Taylor asking to slow down touring and Dave being like, nah,
yeah, that was like, so for me growing up, like Blink was the band, like that's why I started playing guitar. You had Travis Barker, I had Tom DeLonge, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where, like, that's why I wanted, but then like, that was my brother's band.
Okay.
So Foo Fighters came out with Nothing Left to Lose, like right around the same time. And so I was just like, okay, well, if he gets Blink-182, I get Foo Fighters. Cause like, we're discovering this kind of music at the same time. So like I had this kind of respect for Dave Grohl for a very long time. And so like, it's kind of the same where I'm like getting a little disenchanted and the good records are a little tougher to listen to now. And so it's just like this kind of weird thing where like, I don't know, nobody's perfect. Right. And
totally.
Like nobody's a monolith, but it's disappointing all the same,
And it's so funny that you bring up Nothing Left to Lose, because that was also the record that they recorded as a trio. Yeah. Right. And like, talk about a record that rules. Like Aurora is still one of my favorite songs. Like as far as the songwriting element to it,
Yeah, it really felt like, he was making a songwriter record. Right. A little bit more. Like they have the tough guy stuff, like starts with Stacked Actors and stuff like that. But like, it shows a softer side. And I think that like opened me up to like, stuff with electric guitars that wasn't punk rock, where I was like, okay, well, like songs with Ain't It the Life, it's like, that's a little alt country adjacent. Right. So like, when I got out of my angsty Warped Tour years a little bit more, and I was like, all right, well, maybe Wilco's okay, like,
yeah, totally. Right. And like, I was in a pop punk band, right? So like that was the whole thing, the Warped Tour and everything else. And we were playing and opening for like a ton of bands who would come in through Philly. And I remember like we played a show at one of our venues. We opened up for Seosin, and
no kidding.
Yeah. So like we were getting calls to do shows like that. And then all of a sudden we started calling the same venues and be like, hey, like, you ever need an opener, let us know. And it was almost like a complete 180 happened. And it was like this whole indie folk, dudes with beards and acoustic guitar type things. And we were like, huh? And they're like, yeah, they're like, sorry, like nobody wants to listen to y'all anymore. You're done. And we were like, huh, okay. But like the reason why I brought up the Foo Fighters and Dave is like, who knows what's going on like with that camp. And I hope everything's cool and I wish them all the best. But like, just seems like, it just doesn't seem like that's what is going on with Wolf and Mammoth. It seems like it's a little more like egos are checked. Like, here's what we're going to do. And off we go,
Yeah, for sure. Watch, we find out that Wolf is the drummer for the Foo Fighters.
Yeah, right. Well, when they first announced it, I was like, dude, it's like, with everything going on, the negative publicity, like everyone's been screaming for Taylor's kid to come in, Shane, and it's like, all right, I guess this is what they're going to do. But then, Shane's like, nah, man, I'm not doing it. So who knows, maybe maybe he's going to be a one-man band and he's going to be up there playing drums and guitar and singing and have like the cymbals between his legs. Who knows?
Maybe. Yeah. He'll have the kick drum on his back.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so that's it. I'm doing everything.
Yeah.
We're going in a different direction. It's a one-man show.
Yeah, exactly. It's a Piccadilly Circus kind of thing.
If that's what you want to do, hey, do it. And I'm sure he'll sell out arenas.
I'm just imagining Dave Grohl with like one of those harmonica holders, but it has a kazoo in it.
Like slide whistle, whatever. Like, just go up there and have a blast, man.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a dude who fell off the stage and broke his leg and then came back on stage and finished the show. So anything's possible.
Anything is possible for sure.
But yeah, man. So, sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent.
No, that's great. That's great. No, absolutely.
And like, if you see that I'm looking down, it's because I keep pulling up my phone so I can see the set list, or not the set list, the track listing of Mammoth II.
I've got it up as well. I keep going back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So what else? So like that third track, Another Celebration at the End of the World, right?
Mm-hmm.
Compared to the first two songs, right? It was like, okay, it seems like things are a little more quote unquote, I don't want to say basic, I should say digestible, right?
Yeah,
it was like
sure.
It's like, hey, here's the song that's going to be the radio single, because it's very straightforward. It's just like that driving floor tom with the snare on 2 and 4 in the beginning with like the guitar riff. And then it just kind of builds in. And then of course those verses that he's playing on like that jam block that's supposed to sound like a cowbell. But also with that music video, right? That was the music video where I think that may have been the first time that he showed all of the band members, like they were playing like a dive bar somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Type of thing where, he broke up with his other band that was all of him, so it was a really cool nod to say like, hey, like it's, even though this is Wolf Van Halen, this is a band kind of a thing. And I think, from what seems like is going on, it might be like a transition thing happening. At least I know that same radio station MMR just did, they do these really cool sessions where they'll have a band come in a really small venue that might be like 500 people capacity at most, super limited, where they'll only have a few folks come in, and be able to see the artists play live. And then it's a Q&A with one of the DJs. And, everything that they talked about was like, they're not saying Mammoth WVH or Mammoth Wolf Van Halen. And they're just straight up calling it Mammoth. Cool. And even like that new single that he released, it looks like it, again, like his whole band's in the music video. It's almost like he's paying homage to Thriller. So Another Celebration at the End of the World, in my opinion, was like hey, like we're just going to show we do more than just me doing this all by myself kind of a thing,
Yeah,
which was cool.
Sure. That is really cool. And I think that like we kind of touched on it a little bit, but like when you are making parts like the ones that are on this record, and then you can find people to step into those, and not even like, because I watched a couple live videos too. So like, they're not even just like playing the parts. They're like really making it their own. And like, they feel like that's the band that made this record kind of thing, Yeah. Which is tough to do. Like as somebody who's like, you've probably been a hired gun. I've certainly been a hired gun for shows. Like you just kind of want to play the parts. Right. And like, if I'm filling in for somebody, or if it's like a cover show, like I'm not trying to get fancy with it or something like that.
Right.
These musicians are, and they're doing great, and it works, and they just like, they gel.
Yeah. And so cool. It could have been like one of those conversations where, I know myself when I get hired for a gig, especially if I'm filling in, it's like, all right, I'm going to play the parts.
Yeah.
And then once they give the green light of like, yo, make it your own, then okay, I will. But I always approach those kinds of gigs, and I'm sure you do the same, where it's like, I want them to feel as comfortable as possible, especially being the drummer. Like I don't want to be that loose cannon that has everybody feeling like they're on eggshells. And then they're like, man, this gig sucks. Where I want them to be like, cool, it feels like it usually does. So we're cool with it. And then have them say like, you know what, do your own thing, change some things up. And again, like, I think this shows Wolf's demeanor, and it shows that like the ego is checked of like, you must play these parts exactly the way that I did them. He's kind of like, nah, man, do your thing.
Yeah.
You know, and it's cool.
Those are always the best fill in or like gigs to get in general, just because it's just like, no, I want you to play because I wanted you to play, you know, and it's just like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, totally. Totally. You know, and like I've had gigs like that. Some of my, I guess, best teachable moments, because they say like the best teachable moments you ever get are the ones that you fail at. For me, the first one was I actually auditioned for national Broadway tours.
Cool.
And one was Mamma Mia, and then the other one was Green Day's American Idiot. And this was like 2013 or so. And American Idiot was the first one that I got the info for. And as I was waiting for that audition, it was all the same thing. Like, they sent you a couple tracks. They say, videotape yourself playing, submit it. And then once you do, they review. And if you make it to the final round, it's an in-person audition. So as I was waiting for that, I got a call from the same company, and they're like, hey, there's an opening for Mamma Mia. Do you want to try that too? And I was like, all right. And like, I was like, whatever. Like, I want the American Idiot gig. You're on stage. It's Green Day. It's all that dope shit. Or I should say dope stuff.
You can swear on here. It's fine.
Okay, cool. I know, like, with some stuff, if you post this on YouTube or anything, like, sometimes they say that's not cool.
No.
All right, dig it. So yeah, so I was like, whatever, like it's ABBA music. Like, I can rip through this. And I remember when that when that musical came out, my mom saw it, fell in love with it, bought the record, and like it was playing nonstop in the car because she had a CD player. So like, kind of already knew it.
Yeah.
So I do the Mamma Mia audition, and I'm like, whatever, I want the American Idiot one. I go to the American Idiot gig or the audition, and instead of playing with some of the musicians who are already on the tour and not leaving, they're pairing you up with other people auditioning for other instruments. So of course, when they say, hey, we want you to do Jesus of Suburbia, where, you know, it's changing nonstop because it's like one of those long ass songs. They had me on a click and no one else on a click. So when we were transitioning into I Don't Care, the guitar player stopped, and I stopped too. And it was in that moment. In that moment when I realized, right?
Yeah. Oh, no.
And I was like, oh no. I was like, this falls on me. I was like, because as the drummer, you are the backbone. Like, if that happens, you have to keep going and let them get back on. You know, you can adapt and adjust to help them out, because if you do that, especially in a musical theater situation, like the whole cast is going to be like, what just happened? Like, record stop.
Yeah.
And then the second teachable moment I had was, you know, back in the day, I used to be scared that I was playing too loud all the time, because again, you know, in middle school and in high school, I think it's just embedded in any music director's mind to just yell at the drummers that they're playing too loud. And then they give them brushes and say, play with these, they're softer, when like that's a completely different thing. And it'll take me like years to go over why that's not true. But
that's not how that works at all.
Not how that works at all, you know, or like being the rock guy in a jazz school, and they're like, yo, dude, like, can you not play so loud all the time? It's like, okay. So once I finally got out into the real world and was playing, I remember losing gigs because people were like, it just feels like you're not giving us anything. So
interesting.
That's when I was like, cool, like moving forward. But mind you, like if I ever went into recording sessions or if it was an original band, you know, like everybody was like, the reason why we called you is because you play with a ton of energy and you're playing really loud, and that's what we want. And that's why we called you. And now you're coming here and it's kind of like falling flat. Right.
Yeah.
So that was the one thing, and it's still something I tell all of my students of like, play the way that you play when you walk into a gig. And then if it's too much, they'll tell you and then tone it back. But it's better for them to do that than you not give them enough and have them think that you're giving it your all. And then they're like, it's not enough. Like, it's not enough of that oomph. It's not driving it, you know? Mm-hmm. So those are like two of those big teachable moments that like always I've told myself of like, just hit them hard, let them tell you it's too loud and toned down now. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like you have to steer that ship as the drummer, you know?
Yeah. It's amazing. Also, like, it kind of goes back, and you brushed on this a little bit when you were kind of talking about like what you teach. It's the confidence, and you have to go no matter what you play. If you're a singer, if you're a guitar player, if you're a drummer, it's the amount of confidence that you have that you're doing the correct thing.
Right.
And I did a musical, the musical We Will Rock You, which is the Queen musical. And which is tough for me because like, I don't really know how to read sheet music, but I just like got this gig handed to me. And so I was just like, well, I need to do this. Like, this would be great. And I know how to read it enough, and I know the songs enough where I was like, I know what parts I'm playing. But then like, because I'm a maniac and out of an abundance of like not wanting to screw this up, I learned every guitar part for all of the Queen songs, like all of the harmonies, everything, like the rhythm parts. Cause I was just like, if I'm reading this wrong, I just need to know that like I'm going into this where I can shift gears or something like that. Right. Which is like, it's way too much.
Mm-hmm. Especially with Queen, man.
It's way too much. And I was just like absolutely having the worst time. But I'm nervous, but I'm like, I got this. Like, I know all these parts, and we get to play Bohemian Rhapsody. Right. And it's like this big moment. And in Bohemian Rhapsody, there's a part where like, it's going like, and then on the other ear, it goes, so we had two guitar players. The other guy was supposed to play the second one, and I was supposed to play the first one. And I was like reading the sheet music, and I knew the timing. And so we get to the first one, and we both do it. And then there's just silence. And the guy looks at me and just goes, wrong, in front of everybody. Just like calls me, like looks at me and says, wrong. And so I'm like mortified.
Sure.
You know, and I'm like, I had this. Like I was so certain. And then we wrap up, and then he comes up to me after. He's like, yeah, so I actually just read the sheet music wrong. You were actually right. So I'll just do it. I'll just do it the other way next time. And I was just like, you dick.
Yeah. And like, that's like the twofold thing, right? So number one, that's something that I think I've realized recently, and maybe it's because I'm a little bit older now and not scared as much, but like, it's okay to make a mistake, right? It's not about playing to perfection. It's about, if a mistake happens, how do you recover and keep everything going and try to make it as minimal of an issue as possible, right? Yeah. So like when that goes on, the fact that the cat like straight up is like, we're going to make a big thing out of this.
Yeah.
You know, number one. And number two, like kudos to you, because like, that's something that like, especially when something like that happens in musical theater, it's like, oh no. And like, that can really get in your head, you know, but there's more to the show, and you got to finish this out, you know? Right. So you got to be like, all right, it's happened. It's almost a holistic approach type of thing. Like, all right, like I've acknowledged that it's happened. It's already happened, and it's in the past. So now it's time to keep moving forward and focus on what I got to do next. You know?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Gosh. Yeah, no, that was a real trip. But yeah, again, like it's a kind of like a character building moment, which I feel like the other ones, your examples kind of were as well, where it's just like, you know, afterwards, like I felt like I learned something and like learned something about myself. And yeah, I mean, I never did a theater gig, but I did love it. Yeah. And I would do it again, but Yeah, it's wild. But I do want to go back to Mammoth just before we run out of time.
Yeah, totally.
So it's a little interesting because I usually ask my guests to rank the albums of who we're talking about, but there's only the two. So, and I'm assuming since you picked two, that's going to be number one, unless I'm wrong about that.
So, and it's funny, it is number one, but it's not like a marginal difference, right?
Sure,
they are so close to one another. What I did when you were like, oh, we should pick a record, I was like, oh, that's going to be hard. Mm-hmm. So I sat and I just listened to both. And I remember there's a couple on the first one, or maybe only one on the first one, where I'm like, I can listen to this, but I can also be okay with skipping it kind of a thing. Whereas with two, I started glancing through it and I was like, I don't think really there's anything that I would skip, because like, Take a Bow is the one that's a little more subdued. It's a little tamer and everything, but that whole guitar solo in the middle of it's crazy.
Yeah.
And then of course it's leading you into Optimist. I'm pretty sure that's the one that's in 7.
Yes. Right. It is.
It is. And then, Wolf does the ridiculous drum feature in the middle of it, which is also in 7. So when that comes out, it's so cool too, because if you're unsure that it isn't in 7, right? If you're just like an average listener who's not a music nerd, you're just hearing this bell of a ride cymbal and you're like, oh, that's kind of odd. It doesn't seem like it's, but he's hitting the one to kind of tell you like, here it is. Here's the one. Here's the one. So then when he starts going into the drum feature and doing all these crazy things on the toms and the snare and the kick drum, going through all of that stuff and just building and building and building, it's like, cool. Where that downbeat is. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, cool, now I'm going to give you everything. And then it just finally the tension, build. And then the release in the middle of the bridge is when the whole band locks in and it's in 4,
Yeah.
Just crazy.
I mean, that's such brilliant writing,
right? To
be able to do that and do it so seamlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, it feels so gratifying when it goes to 4, it's just like, oh yeah, like that is sick.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that it's like, you have a song where it starts out, it's bass drums and that's it. Right. And it's in 7 and then the choruses are in 4. Right. It's just ridiculous. It's just crazy, man. And then of course, like definitely that, I would say that was the song that was like the music nerd song for everybody. Like, hey, if you're into this kind of stuff, like here it is. And like, and of course it didn't miss, just like everything else, no miss, just right on the money. I remember the first time I heard that, especially when he went into that drum feature, I remember just like screaming in the car, just being like, what did I just listen to? What just happened? Like, and being like, not like it was just like mind boggling to me. Like, what did he just do? And like, he does stuff like that in Mammoth 1. But that in particular, I was like, dude, like have to rewind, listen to it again. And I'm like, what? Like just going for it.
Yeah, for sure. And when that, like, at least from my perspective, if you are thinking that, then that's like, that's pretty impressive because like, if anybody who isn't familiar with what you do goes and finds you on social media, they'll see what number are you at? Like 750 now? Like it's so many.
Dude, I do one every day. So like, I don't know. And like, I schedule them in advance, but we're around there.
100. I mean, I see them every day. And I watch every single one. I try not to comment on every single one because I feel like that's weird for anybody who comes in.
Dude, so there's this other guy. If you're following on TikTok, there was one guy, and TikTok's super weird. I mean, as a creative, right? So like, that was so. Just to kind of backtrack a little bit. So this whole Guess the Song series I started because everyone says the same thing with social media, like take your long form content, break it up into short form, and then that way you can diversify and also post a little more frequently. So I had this Snare Saturday series that I started, and I was showcasing an Orange County drums and percussion vintage snare drum because all of my favorite bands were playing Orange County and played that drum, right?
Absolutely.
The Warp, they were the SJC before SJC. Everybody on Warp Tour was playing them. Mm-hmm. So I finally got one, and I was like, well, instead of playing through a few different tunings, I'm going to play like 30, 40 seconds of all of my favorite bands that were basically signed the drive-through who played these drums and see if people can guess. And then I started making that the short form content for YouTube Shorts. Everybody's like, yo, you got to do TikTok. And I stayed away from it just because as an educator, you hear the horror stories of like the school TikTok challenges. Like I remember one year they were like TikTok challenge, vandalize the school in some way. And you're like, come on, Mm-hmm. So I did it and I started posting this stuff and, just put 3 clues up. And, after the 70th video or something, it took off. It was scary how much it took off. And then they're like, you're eligible to now make revenue here on TikTok. And the whole platform, they're like, we're going to pay more than everybody else. And you're like, okay, cool. I'll sign up. And then I started seeing the money that was coming in and I was like, wow, they're not lying. So like to be transparent. And I mean, I tell everybody this. So I would say I started that end of the school year, right? So it was around this time. And then come September is when it really started to take off. October is when I really started making money. October, November, December, January, February, I was making $2,000 a month just on TikTok videos, just doing this.
No
and it was
kidding.
Crazy. Yeah, it was nuts. And then all of a sudden, TikTok got in trouble with what was it, UMG for the licensing.
Yeah.
And then they were like, we're not going to be pushing any music creatives because of this whole legal thing. And like, I watched it just literally drop. And for 2 weeks straight, I started getting notifications. Like I would watch my videos for the first 30, 40 minutes. They were taking off like they always would. And then I would get a notification saying that my videos were unoriginal, low quality content.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was happening for a while.
And then I would have to dispute it. And then they would rule it back in my favor and say, hey, you're cool. There's no strikes. You're not going to get in trouble. But by that point, everything was dead. Right. Yeah. So I started looking into this and I'm like, what's going on? And then I find out a lot of creatives started saying the same thing. TikTok, they play these games where they promote your videos to help you get a following faster. And then once you create it, they're like, cool, see you, bye. You're already addicted. We're good. Yep. And that's kind of what's happening now. So like, if you scroll through that whole thing, it's like, and mind you, maybe it's because I've done over 750 of them at this point, but it's like some of those videos, especially towards the beginning, like we're talking like within 24 hours getting 10, 15, 20,000 views. Right. Some of them were over a few million. And now it's like, I'm lucky if they break over 1,000, but you know what? I'm cool with that because it's a cool little community that, like, it's the same people who come and they guess. And then once in a while, I'll get some people who guess and they're like, hey, I got one. And like, I haven't been able to get one for a long time. And this is the first one I got. And it's like, that's dope. That like you're sticking around and doing this, Yeah.
I love the series. I think it's great. Every time it comes up, I'm like, oh, I'm watching. Like, I got to figure this out.
Yeah. And it's one of those things like you try to figure out, I guess, at the end of the day, it's drum covers, right?
Yeah.
But you can't really do a drum cover because of copyright. However, drum parts aren't protected under copyright law. So if it's just me playing a drum part and there's no backing track and I am playing it, not like superimposing the original and pulling it from Moises or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. You're not taking the stems.
Yeah. So like, there's been a couple times where like something will come up and it's like, cool, you dispute it. And it's like, no, like if you follow copyright law, like I'm not doing anything because copyright law is talking about vocal melodies, vocal rhythms, progressions like that, but nothing with drums. Yeah. So I can do this. And it's cool. Like it's a little community thing. And like, here's the crazy story. So I was sitting in with a cover band, this past Friday, and there's this giant Italian festival in Wilmington, Delaware. And we're wrapping up the second set, and I look over to like the right side, and I see this dude looking at me with wide eyes and his jaw on the floor. And usually if somebody's looking at me, it's another drummer. And if they have a certain look on their face, it's, you know, the typical drummer of like, hey, yeah, I could do that better.
Yeah.
But like and I'm playing cover.
Or it's the, what kind of snare are you using?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, what cymbals you got over there?
Yeah.
But like the fact his jaw was on the floor and I'm playing like typical, like I'm playing Dua Lipa and like typical pop music, you know, nothing too crazy. So
like every Italian festival has.
Exactly. You know, exactly. So like playing the thing, right? And then like I look back over and his eyes are still wide open and he mouths to me, "Is this you?" and pulls out his phone and it's playing one of the Guess the Song videos. And I was like, I just go, "Yeah, man, that is me." And he like starts jumping up and down. He starts getting super excited. He's like, "No way." So
you're a celebrity. That's amazing.
Yeah. So like we wrap up the set. I find him and I was like, "Dude, I have to find you. Like, I just wanted to come say hey and everything else." And he was like, I have to let you know that like I've been following you since you started this series, like around 100. He goes, "And I'm from North Carolina. I'm visiting my girlfriend who lives here in Wilmington. We came here." He's like, "It's just so odd that out of everything, it's like this dude that I've been following and like I've shown my girlfriend your videos before and like she has no idea because she's not a drummer." He's like, "And then here you are. You're playing." And it's like, yeah, like I do this too. I don't really post about it just because of, you know, I don't know why. Maybe I should, instead of being just like the social media cat, just playing stuff. But yeah, like, so it's odd, man. It's a weird thing, but it's also super dope to like just have that little small niche community of people who come out and check things out, you know?
For sure. Well, yeah, I mean, that's so great. God, I love that. And it is a really cool thing. And I think that, especially like currently, being on the internet is such like a doom and gloom thing. And so like watching your videos and having that something fun come up is like such a necessary thing. So like, I really appreciate that you're doing that. And I think it's really great.
Thank you. Yeah. And like, same to you, you know, like it's funny. You have someone like yourself and then Alex Melton, you know, who was somebody I discovered on TikTok. Like seeing stuff like that is so cool. But then also if you're going to do this thing on social media, like you can't take yourself too seriously because like at the end of the day, it's social media. It's a highlight reel. Like, you know, some of those Guess the Songs, like I'll admit this, like there are some where it's like, man, this took way too long for me to nail that take, because in my mind, I'm like, I have to play this part verbatim. There's been times where like I'll play a Metallica tune and like it just takes one person to be like, you know, you didn't quite do this right. And then as soon as you do, like the rest come out. So like ever since then, I've been like, okay, I got to make sure that like if I'm going to do this, like I got to play the part. So there have been times where like you would think it's something super basic and it's like, you know, I can't believe that just took me like a few takes to knock that in or lock it in, you know? But then also it's like, we all go through this, right?
Everybody.
Like, every single musician creative does the same exact thing. There ain't nobody out there who's like, I'm nailing this in one take.
No,
you know?
No. Yeah. I mean, I remember even like just on that note, just thinking like there was a record I made where we had played the songs live, like hundreds of times, like so many times, but we just hadn't recorded this one song. So like we get to that one, we save it for last because we know we're going to be exhausted. We're mostly tracking live. Like they really didn't want to do overdubs. So I was like, cool, I got it. And I like couldn't do it. Like for some reason, it was just like nothing was working. I wasn't hitting the right notes. I was sloppy. I was like, we had to do like 5 takes of it, which is like, you know, I don't know, in Beatles terms, like nothing, but like for that session, like the hardest one to play, I got in like the first take and we kept that one. And this one was the easiest. And like, I just couldn't do it. So yeah, I feel like anybody who's recorded has that experience.
Yeah. And like on top of that, I think it also comes stem to like the gatekeepers. Like that's the other thing that we were talking about with Wolf. Like he dropped this stuff. It dropped online before like the actual album was released and had to deal with like the typical, musician gatekeepers of like, to get off my lawn kind of a thing,
Yeah.
So we all have that mindset of like, especially, I talk to my mentor about this all the time, because when we do these educational things, he says the same thing. He's like, man, like you're always busy. You're making videos, you're doing this, you're doing that and everything else. It's like, yeah, like I feel like I have to, because if I don't, or I should say, I feel like I have to only because like I haven't played with any really big bands, like I would say the largest band that I was in was a band called Practically Single, because like we were playing and opening for all of these types of bands and things like that. Right. But like was never really in a band that did anything too big, you know? So I know that there are people out there that like they see my face pop up on something and they're like, who's this guy? Or like, oh man, he's back again. Like he doesn't play with anybody. So like I have to kind of prove that like, okay, yeah, you're right. I haven't, but that doesn't mean that I'm a crappy player or that I'm just doing this for the sake of doing it, So
for sure.
You have to kind of lead with your best foot forward and show everybody that it is possible to do that kind of stuff. And, you also can't take yourself too seriously, because there's been times, man, like I'll screw up a clue or there's been a couple of videos where people are like, hey man, like they're the same clues from the last video. And you're like, I record everything in batches. Right. So it's like, all right. So I messed that one up. Yep. Well, hey, I'm human.
Yep,
Here
exactly. Yep.
Sorry, folks. And like, I think Wolf felt, or he does that, you listen to interviews that he's done. He's talked about that kind of a thing of like, just trying to do something that you enjoy doing and having fun doing, This is the big thing behind it. So, yeah.
Well, amazing. I feel like that's a pretty good, we circled back to Wolf. So I think that's a pretty good place to wrap it up. But Nick, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And it was super fun to actually like chat with you, not on the internet. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you for sitting down and thanks for being a musician's musician.
Yeah, of course. And thank you, Nick. And yeah, hopefully we get to do a few more chats besides just internet banter.
I would love that.
Or we should totally do a song of Nick and the Costas.
I was thinking we get a couple other Nick Costas involved and we just make a record.
Let's do it. And just call it Nick Costa.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. All right.
What can go wrong?
Yeah, thanks, man.